Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are all having a fantastic day. So as you can tell by the title, we finally are at that time of the year where it's time to release the preliminary winter outlook. Again, this is very far out. I probably will be releasing 4 or 5 more additional winter outlooks throughout the year, throughout the fall and before winter. But this is speculation rather at this point, rather than forecasting. It is more or less a pretty much a throw in the dark with a guess, but it's more of an educated guess than just a random guess, right? And I still think it's fun. A lot of people just like looking at forecasts, and so do I. See what people have to think and say. So again, if this doesn't come true, wouldn't be surprised. But I do think tidbits of this information are very valuable, and a lot of them will carry through into the winter. But yeah, before we get into this, if you guys would like to support this channel, if you like this video, like the other videos on this channel, feel free to check it out. Consider subscribing, consider giving it a thumbs up button, and if you have any comments or concern, I pretty much will be answering all comments down below, so you could leave one, and I will let you know what I think about the question or whatever you have to ask. All right, let's get into this. So again, this is for this upcoming year. And first off, what I want to start off by looking at is the ENSO. Now, I don't want to say that we don't have that many things to look at this far out. There are very few things we could kind of base our forecast off of. But these two, these few things are still pretty powerful, and they could serve to inform us quite a bit. So this is a probabilistic ENSO outlook, and I'll tell you what the ENSO is in just a minute. But notice, I want to tell you that this was updated the 8th of July, and look, ENSO neutral is favored through the Northern Hemisphere summer, but the La Nina is more likely during the fall and the winter. And look at these bars. See, so notice we have January, August, right, or sorry, June, August, September. So that's what we are in right now in neutral, and there is most likely a La Nina that's going to emerge. There are some signs that it could even emerge faster than it is showing right now, the signs of this. I think it could be there already by August. And notice that we do have that La Nina in forecast. So I want to just emphasize this is another set of models that I think is very accurate. It shows basically what in models that predict the ENSO and what they think will it be. And notice this is the 0.5, right? Anything below is a La Nina, anything above is an El Nino, and in between is that neutral zone, which is what we are right now. And notice that a lot of the models are showing with that dashed forecast, which is the ensemble mean, the kind of the average, they're showing a La Nina. Almost none are showing a El Nino, and very few. Some are showing a neutral, but the majority are showing a La Nina of some sort. And notice that's what they're saying. Predicts an ENSO neutral followed by a La Nina during the fall and winter. Now you may be wondering, okay, so what on earth is this ENSO, or what on earth is this, La Nina, El Nino stuff? So basically, what that is this area of water right off the coast of Ecuador and Peru, and whether or not it's below, which is the blue, or above average, that's basically indicative of whether it's a El Nino or La Nina. If it is 0.5 degrees above average, then it is considered a El Nino. If it is 0.5 degrees below average, then it is considered a La Nina. And notice that right now we're looking at this, and there's some pockets of warm, right? So above average, some pockets of cool, and that's what it is right now. It's a bit leaning towards the cooler, right? But it's definitely not enough to be considered a La Nina or an El Nino, which is why it's considered a neutral. Now we're expecting to see these colors turn more blue right here, and that's why we're expecting that La Nina. And those models that I showed you, they're predicting, how will this turn out? And you can see actually right here on the side, September, this is what they think it'll look like, and it'll probably peak around late fall into early winter. Notice with that La Nina going strong and probably fading away into next summer and spring, potentially going into something else. Or maybe like last year we had a La Nina, went a bit into neutral zone, and now potentially is going to go back, or more likely. So why does this matter? Well, a typical La Nina pattern, this is what its impacts are on the globe. And yeah, it has impacts all over the globe. This is what its impacts are on the US, I should specify. Notice that we have a high pressure right there off the Gulf of Alaska that pretty much sends a polar jet stream to buckle across Alaska, and then it causes it to trough a bit further down into the United States. It causes cool air across the west and into portions of the Midwest. Not necessarily so much the Northeast, but there definitely are times where it can do that. Notice it's more drier and warm towards the south, but I do want to emphasize that every La Nina year is pretty much different. And this is a map that overall shows us what can be expected, but really it's rather inaccurate, and there, for example, last year was a La Nina, and Texas, this is what it looks like during a La Nina. But I'm sure anyone that lives in Texas remembers that February outbreak of very, very cold air where there was ice forming all the way on the Gulf Coast. I mean, it was super, super cold here. And again, that did happen as well during the 2011 La Nina. This year, it may or may not happen. They're all slightly different, but they do have characteristics that are usually shared. It's wetter and cooler across the northwest. It is a bit drier and warmer towards the south, at least for a good period of time, but there definitely can be brief shouts of very cold air. There can be a very wet pattern for the Great Lakes, the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic. And again, I say wet, or this forecast says wet, but if you mix it with that cool air, obviously you could have a lot of snow with that, and potentially nor'easters. But it's warm, wet, combining with just enough cold air, and you could see a lot of storm systems. If you recall 2018 March, that was the La Nina pattern. And remember how there was 4 nor'easters that just tore through the Northeast? Exactly. That's how we know that La Ninas can favor large storms if the ingredients are set up, and many of them. If you recall, I think it was 4 systems in a matter of 3 or 4 weeks. It was just on repeat, and all it takes is 3 or 4 of those, and that makes the headlines for the whole winter across that region. And I do want to say that, for example, 2008, 2007, 2008 in my region was a very wet year in terms of precipitation, very high volume of precip, but a lot of that did fall as snow and rain, but that snow was still above average. I think we averaged seeing around 50 inches, which may not seem like a lot for some, but that was above average for my location by almost 20. But we did also see quite a bit of rain, so that's the thing with the La Nina. Usually the north and the northwest is a bit wetter, while the dry is secluded towards the south. But again, doesn't always keep that way. Now, I am going to be choosing some analogs, right? So basically years that I think are comparable to this upcoming winter, and we'll be looking at what they did and kind of how are they similar. And basically how I chose that is I looked at summers that were neutral going into a La Nina in the winter and fall. So, for example, notice 2020, that's a year I chose. I chose last year because it's similar in terms of its ENSO layout. Notice, we're in the neutral right now. It was in the neutral last year, and then it went into a La Nina. Then the next year I chose was 2016, 2017. It was a neutral. It went into a La Nina, right? Or, sorry, I chose 2017. And the reason I chose this year was because for the 2016 ENSO, it ended the La Nina in December, which this one's most likely going to continue afterwards. So I chose 2017, 2018. Notice it was a neutral, went into a La Nina for the winter. And then now the next year I chose was 2012 into 2011 into 2012. Notice it was a La Nina, brief neutral, back into a La Nina. And again, that's what this year could look like. I also chose years like 2008 into 2009. Notice there was a bit of a neutral and then a La Nina. I did 2007, 2008. There's a bit of a neutral a bit earlier on than this year, but eventually it did go back into a La Nina. Same thing with 2006, 2005 into 2006. Notice neutral, summer, right? And then it went into the La Nina for the fall. And I chose a few more that went back all the way to 1984, I think was my last year, or 83, which you could see was a neutral, El Nino neutral, and the La Nina. Okay, so with that in mind, this is what all those years that it's very similar La Nina and ENSO layouts, this is what their June through August looked like. So comparable years, I think, to our upcoming winter. And of course, we're in summer right now. So I wanted to see were those summers hot? Were they cool? And this year, for the most part, the summer has been rather warm. Again, notice a lot of these years were warm towards the Great Lakes and Upper Plains rather than the West and Northwest. But at least there is some sort of a correlation that it was warm. And yes, if you were to put up this year's anomaly of the winter, or sorry, of the summer, you'd see the hottest temperatures across the west and northwest and into the northern plains. But it definitely hasn't been cold across the east. Really only the south where it has been below average. In other areas, it's been more of a mix. But at least we have that. So this is what their summers look like. Again, I looked at the individual summers all the years. I decided not to show them because there's just so many images. But really, they varied quite a bit. So really, you can't really tell anything based off that. Now, the more important factor is this is what the winters followed up by. So, assuming that this year is comparable to these years, this is what our winter could look like. And notice that it does line up with what the La Nina shows, at least in temperatures. It's warmer across the east, the northeast, maybe even the south, the southwest. But it's cooler across the northern half of the country. And a good chunk is also just white, which is around average. And look, it gets very cold across British Columbia into southern Canada. And that would be good news, as they had a ton of heat this year. And it would probably take a nice break from that. Again, as I mentioned earlier in the video, some La Nina years are completely different from the ones the other ones, right? For example, 2011, 2012 was a very, very warm La Nina. Not much snow fell across the United States. A lot of location ended up seeing above average temperatures and minimal snow, but it was a La Nina. And then 1995 was a very, very, very cold La Nina year. I mean, it was generally pretty much opposite of what happened in 2011, 2012. And there was a lot of snow. I think some records for cold still stand from that year. So, yeah, again, a lot of variance, but overall, notice that where it was cool, they did tend to agree on that it was across the northwest, the northern U.S., and into southern and southwestern Canada. Now, this is just the temperatures, but let's take a look at the precipitation and see if that agrees. And based on what we saw from the previous La Nina graph, there is some sort of agreement. It is drier across the south and southeast, but notice it's not horribly dry. Really, the southwest seems to be the driest, which would be bad news for the south this year, unfortunately, with the drought. But notice the northwest is very, very wet, and that's usually what happens with the La Nina. British Columbia, it's also pretty wet, above average. And then you could assume a lot of that would fall as snow, especially with those below average temperatures. You know, cities like Seattle, Portland could pick up decent amounts of snow. I mean, last year there were a few storms that did drop quite a bit of snow for those cities. It definitely was more than in an average year. And then notice across the Northeast and the Great Lakes, there's again above average precipitation. It isn't by a ton, but if there's cold air, and that's even if it's warm air, honestly, and above average precipitation, a lot of that would still fall as snow because even if it's a warm winter, there's still going to be plenty of days and nights that are below freezing. It's not going to be every single day, which would be kind of more of a cold winter. So definitely enough to produce a blizzard, a nor'easter, sufficient snow systems. And if it's one of those colder La Ninas, that's definitely a snowy year. Even if it's a warmer La Nina, it still could favor a snowier year for the Great Lakes and Northeast, and even portions of the Deep South right here. So, with that being said, I do want to take a look at the 3-month outlook temperature probability from the Climate Prediction Center. Again, this is very far out. I would take this with a grain of salt, but notice that for their December, January, February timeline, which again is this winter, what they do have is a lot of the U.S. being warm. But if you look at these forecasts, they always favor warm. That's just kind of their default, and it's weird how they do it, but I guess that's what they do. And notice that equal chances for a large portion of the U.S., and they're favoring some cool towards the Northwest. And let me tell you, looking at these forecasts for the past 4 or 5 years, like the NOAA Climate Prediction Center ones, the fact that they have a little bit of below average this far out indicates that they're either pretty confident that the La Nina is going to form and, the cool air is going to be there, or they're confident in some other factor. Because usually they just pretty much go as far as the white. They rarely show such blue. They rarely show any blue colors. So this is my temperature forecast, and this is where I think temperatures will be either above average or below average. Now, that doesn't mean that Minnesota will just be cold. It's compared to average. So if Iowa's average is, for example, 35, somewhere in southern Iowa, let's say, I think that you could have a winter that has an average of 33.3 overall. Just a bit cooler, not necessarily cold, because yes, all winters are technically cold. Same thing with the Southwest. Usually it's warm, but if you're in Phoenix and your average is 65, I think you could be in the maybe 70s for an average. Notice, so again, I do think that the Southwest will be warm. I do think that there could be some cold shots of air like last year. That's why I excluded Texas, Oklahoma, and the Deep South out of the warm kind of sector. And then I do think it will also be warmer across Florida. Not by that much. This could expand into the southeast, but I don't think it will be as warm as it will be across the southwest. I would say that, again, the northeast will have a bit of a warmer impact, but again, I don't think it will necessarily make a huge difference on the snow. I just do think it won't be as cold because of, again, that La Nina, which usually that cold air stays a bit to the north and west. And again, I think the cold air will be expansive to the north and northwest, but how far it goes, maybe it's just limited to where this darker blue is, or maybe it's even more expansive than what I showed. It's hard to tell, but notice that a lot of these locations are left in the gray because I just do not know, and I don't want to be filling in this whole map because it's tough to tell where exactly the coolest temperatures will be. But again, even if it's for Chicago, Michigan, Indiana, even if it's normal, I would say that I'm leaning towards a cooler winter for these locations here. But, you can still see a very snowy winter with normal temperatures. It's been a while since the last time we've seen a cold winter here. And even, the warmer winters have seen relatively cooler compared to the very warm winters at this point. So, yeah, I think, just because you're not in a cold doesn't mean you're not going to see snow. Same thing with, you can see New England up there. Now let's take a look at my official final winter forecast. This is kind of the highlights, right? What I think will be the dominating headline for the winter, what it will be remembered as. So notice Arctic air for the northwest. That's basically just me saying it will be chilly. It will be colder than usual, and that's why I have the cold air in place over there. Again, with the La Nina bringing that jet stream trough right in very vigorously, it could be a bit more expansive. Notice we move into the Great Lakes. I think a lot of those locations will benefit from that cold air, but they will also benefit from the wet and warm, humid southeast, and that's why I think it will provide for some large systems, large snowstorms, maybe some even Alberta clippers. So I would say cold and snowy. By the way, for the lake effect, I wouldn't really say it's looking insane. I do think that it will be just an average year. I don't think it will be extraordinary, and yeah, that's just my prediction. But again, those are also very hard to predict because the lake waters aren't really too warm. They also there's just nothing really too supportive of whether or not the cold air will reach that far to them. So again, I think it'll just be a normal year. Notice I do think that New England, the Northeast, and portions of the Mid Atlantic will also be snowy. Again, you may be thinking, why did you have warm across the Northeast? Again, it's you could if your average in Caribou, Maine is like 27, maybe 28, 29. It's still cold enough for snow, and I think there will be more precip, which is why it will be warmer. Because usually with precip events, it is warmer. Notice I think it will be snowy, and a lot of that snow will come from the blizzards across the Northeast. Now that's kind of a question mark. It's really tough to tell whether or not there will be any big storms. If you recall last year, New York City, Boston, they received pretty good amounts of snow. It wasn't an extremely snowy year. It wasn't definitely a record by any means, but it was better than New York City seeing 6 inches, I think, in 2019, 2020, which was just a absolutely snowless winter, which last year I think they got around 40 inches or somewhere around that. So definitely, I think it could be a repeat, maybe even some more snow, which is again why I kind of indicated with those blizzards. And notice I do think again, as I mentioned, the snow across the Northeast will be a bit from some systems that form across the Great Lakes. And if it's too warm for a coastal system, I think it will still be cold enough for snow up here across in England, the inner part of New England. Right. Notice the southeast, as I mentioned, wet and humid. I don't think it will be as much warm or maybe even humid. I do think it'll be more of a wet pattern. But I would lean though overall towards warm rather than cold. I just don't know if it'll be a huge, warm anomaly. I just don't. Notice I have here cold shots. If you recall, last year there was a massive cold outbreak across the south. There's often these air masses that drive from the northwest, and they could either go more towards the east, but last year they just came crashing to the south, and we saw that recurring, wave after wave, and that's why it was so darn cold across these locations. All sorts of records were broken, and I'm not saying it will happen to that same degree, but I think at least some of that will be replicated. So I do think that's why I have cold shots here. However, I think there will be a stark contrast with the Northwest, which will be rather hot and drier. You will still see snow, I think, obviously for like Sierra Nevadas and whatnot, but it will just be drier than usual and warmer than usual. Maybe not hot, but I have a feeling that there will be a few locations that are going to see some very warm temperatures. And wherever it's gray, it's just a question mark. I'm not too sure about those areas, kind of in between. They could obviously, this warm air could be way more expansive, right? This cool air, this cold shots may not even occur, so that would leave room for this wet and humid to expand, and maybe this cold to be a bit further towards the south. Maybe the blizzards taking a more inland track a bit earlier on rather than just the northeast. So we'll just have to wait and see. Definitely gonna be interesting to see. I do want to say for my folks across southern Canada, as I didn't forget about you if you're still watching this video. I think that a lot of you we'll be just seeing what I have kind of on the border. So if you live across Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, British Columbia, cold air will really be the regime, and also a bit of snow. I think it will be a bit above average, but mainly the chilly air. If you live further across Ontario, bordering into Toronto, again, I think maybe not so much cold, but more snow and more of a wet year, a wet pattern. So again, cold and snowy, and I should add a wet as well. But it doesn't really fit the category. But yeah, I do think that you still will be similar to what the Great Lakes region is receiving. And then the northeast portions and into the Maritimes, again, snowy. It could be quite a few chances for some big storm systems. Maybe not historic ones, right? But definitely some larger ones. And yeah, that basically sums it up. So thank you guys so much for watching. Oh, by the way, for the viewers, if I do have any from northern Mexico, I do think that it will be rather again hot, dry for at least the western portions. It could get cool into the eastern portions if the cold shots materialize. but generally a drier year for you folks. All right, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you all on the next episode. See ya.